From KVUE News in Austin, you're watching Texas This Week with Ashley Goodo.
Thank you for watching Texas This Week. The primary elections are over, but some key races are not set yet. We'll dive into the results from election night and hear from the candidates. But first, let's get to the 3 things you need to know in Texas politics. On Monday, a group of business owners and the Global Black Economic Fund sued the state, trying to reverse Acting Comptroller Kelly Hancock's dismantling of the historically underutilized business program. That program, created by Texas lawmakers in the 1990s, allowed women and minority-owned businesses to get a certification that helped them compete for state contracts. Back in December, Hancock issued emergency regulations replacing the HUB program with the veterans-only program, renaming it Vet Hub. In a statement, he defended the move, pointing to an executive order from Governor Greg Abbott that banned DEI policies in state agencies. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton is investigating Austin ISD for allegations the district is violating the state's new bathroom bill. It requires state and local agencies and public schools to ensure people use restrooms and locker rooms based on their biological sex at birth. The AG gave the district notice Friday, starting a 15-day deadline for the district to ensure the law is being followed. U.S. Representative Tony Gonzalez is dropping out of the runoff race to keep his seat. The decision came hours after House Republican leaders publicly urged the 3-term San Antonio congressman to drop out amid new reports about an affair with a former staffer who died by suicide last September. Gonzalez addressed the affair for the first time on Wednesday, saying he had a lapse of judgment and took full responsibility. With Republicans holding on to a slim majority in the U.S. House, Gonzalez plans to serve out the rest of his term. This election day, Texas voters proved they're not as predictable as some people think. Incumbents lost, Democrats drove turnout, and several key races were left undecided. Let's get into some of the big storylines from election night. First and foremost, more Texans voted in the Democratic primary than the Republican for the first time since 2020. Now in Texas, voters don't have to register with the party and are free to vote in whichever primary they want. And some political insiders predict the Senate race between Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett and State Representative James Tallarico drove independents to vote in the Democratic primary. And it also seems the border is going back to blue. Case in point, Starr County. During the 2024 presidential election, President Donald Trump flipped the blue county red for the first time in 132 years, taking nearly 58% of the vote. But I want you to take a look at this. If we click here on Starr County, only 299 Starr County voters cast ballots in the Republican primary. So let's compare that to the Democratic primary, where, my goodness, nearly 6,700 voters voted in the Democratic primary. And really, that is the story that we're seeing up and down the border. If we go to Webb County, just a little bit further north, about 4,300 voters cast ballots in the Republican primary. But when we look at the Democratic primary, take a look at that number. Nearly 24,000 people voted in the Democratic primary. Now, another major headline, the runoffs. Of course, everyone knows, right, about this race right here. The runoff at the top of the Republican ticket, incumbent U.S. Senator John Cornyn will face Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. What was interesting is that the polls had it wrong. All throughout this election, they had Ken Paxton over Cornyn, but by the end of election night, it looked like the senator got about 26,000 more votes than Ken Paxton. And as expected, the Republican race for Attorney General is also headed to a runoff, and this is another one that was flip-flop. Pollsters had Congressman Chip Roy leading in this race, but actually it was State Senator Mays Middleton who came out on top on election night, gaining more than 155,000 more votes than Congressman Chip Roy. The two, of course, headed to a runoff. And perhaps surprisingly, so is the Democratic race for Attorney General. You have State Senator Nathan Johnson, who came out in the lead, getting about 48% of the vote over former Galveston Mayor Joe Jaworski, who came out with 26% of the vote. Those two headed to a runoff. Another big race that's not decided is which Democrat will face off against Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick come November. State Representative Vicki Goodwin ended the night with 48% of the vote, but the rest was split. And so she will now face Union leader Marcos Velez from the Houston area in the runoff election. Now, the other big surprise for the night is that 4 incumbents lost their races in the primary, a rare occurrence for either a Republican or a Democrat. Texas State Representative Steve Toth defeated incumbent Republican Congressman Dan Crenshaw, who was running for his 5th term. Texas Ag Commissioner Sid Miller lost to Nate Sheets, Governor Greg Abbott's pick for the role. But another Abbott pick, Acting Comptroller Kelly Hancock, lost his bid for the role to former state senator and former Republican gubernatorial candidate Don Huffines. And veteran state representative Chris Turner, former chair of the Texas House Democratic Caucus, lost to 26-year-old Junior Izanu. With no Republican running to represent that North Texas seat, he'll be coming to Austin in January. Countless Texas voters frustrated and confused on election night. Leaders of the Republican parties of Williamson and Dallas counties forced precinct-based voting locations on Election Day, leading to long lines, lawsuits, court orders, reversals, and an unknown number of uncounted ballots as a result.
But I can tell you now that people have been disenfranchised. The reason that we knew that there were problems is because we were receiving the phone calls and the emails. The polls were supposed to stay open until 9, according to a court order. The Supreme Court, just a few minutes ago, just said, shut it down. The Supreme Court also said that they are to separate any votes out that came in after 7 p.m.
On Wednesday morning, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett called State Representative James Tallarico to concede, Tallarico taking 52% of the vote. That night, he hosted what his campaign called a victory party.
One thing is clear today. We're about to take back Texas. To the billionaires who have taken over our state and taken over our country, your unchecked power is coming to an end. Your days dividing working people are numbered. To the people of Texas, no matter how you voted in the primary, this election is our chance to take power back for ourselves and our communities. We're done being divided. We're done being played. We're done being pitted against each other. That old politics is dying. And a new politics is being born through all of us.
For Republicans, the race is far from over. U.S. Senator John Cornyn performed better than polls predicted, walking away with nearly 42% of the vote, about 8 points shy from the 50% needed to avoid a May runoff against Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton.
We now head into a 12-week primary runoff. Elections are about choices, and the choice in the Republican race for the U.S. Senate is crystal clear. I've worked for decades to build the Republican Party, both here in Texas and nationally. I refuse to allow a flawed, self-centered, and shameless candidate like Ken Paxton risk everything we've worked so hard to build over these many years. There is simply too much at stake in this midterm election for our state and for our country.
Paxton told supporters at his election watch party this race is about change.
After all the personal attacks, which there were many, and after all the lies, you listened to what John Cornyn was selling and you weren't buying it. Yeah. Nearly 60% of Texas voters who have known Cornyn for over 40 years, after hearing $100 million worth of ads, chose to vote against the incumbent. That's historic. Tonight, change was on the ballot and change won. Texans want new leadership. They want someone with a proven record of fighting and winning for them. And that's exactly what I'm going to deliver. Because for too long, John Cornyn has turned his back on us.
To call the race between Cornyn and Paxton heated is an understatement. The personal attacks have flowed from day one and aren't expected to stop. That's part of the reason why President Donald Trump now says he will get involved. After not endorsing a candidate for the March election, he wrote on social media Wednesday that he plans to make an endorsement soon because the race, quote, cannot, for the good of the party and our country itself, be allowed to go on any longer, end quote. The president wants the candidate he doesn't endorse to immediately drop out of the race, a demand that's getting mixed reaction. As of this recording, we are still waiting to see who the president will throw his weight behind. The primary runoff election is May 26th. That's Texas This Week.